Hi everyone, this is Freddie with Superbike Unlimited, and this is going to be part 2 of our power upgrade series for the KTM 450 SMR video. Part 2 being we've just installed our DVR exhaust system, and it's a beautiful looking exhaust. And now we're going to be doing a wealth of upgrades to extract the maximum amount of performance out of this thing. So we're going to start stripping stuff off, and we're going to squeeze this thing a bit, see if we can find some untapped potential, and try to make it really fast. So we're going to get right to it. Alrighty, so we've seen some power gains with our new exhaust by DVR, and we also did go ahead and fit some crash protectors. This time we actually went with the Warp 9 ones for a couple of reasons. One, I actually didn't really love the way those others fit, the RNGs. And these are, even though they're a similar design, they're surprisingly flexible. I was kind of blown away by how much these conform to the shape of the silencer. I mean, they basically just wrap right around them. And this is really had a much larger diameter or radius shape to it. So I'm kind of blown away by the fact that it just curled around it like that. But I think they look nicer, and they did say Warp 9, but it was kind of peeling off, so I just took those off. But yeah, I think this is probably a better solution for most people. And then so we've made some power. We're gonna now try to make some more power. This is kind of the part where I've been really excited about making this next step on this bike, and today is the day that we begin that step. So first thing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna increase our compression, put a lightweight piston that's got a higher compression ratio, should be in the low to mid 14s. We'll do some calculating once we get everything put together. We then are going to also install this new and freshly ported and modified head. You probably can't see really well in there, but this is an epoxy port, something that we're doing on our super bikes, and while very expensive, this is there. You can kind of see a bit of the epoxy. Yeah, so here where it's kind of a gray color, essentially what happens is the head in each port is filled in with an epoxy and then reprofiled completely, and you can see it's all the way down in there. This allows the port to be completely redesigned versus simply removing a material. You can actually completely control intake velocities as well as improve volume. And then same deal on the other end. Not a lot of epoxy in there, but obviously completely CNC ported. And then lastly, we have a very special camshaft. This is a cam that's widely used by professionals, or so we're told, and we're just going to test it and see how it does. This should be a very good camshaft. So that's going to be the next thing that we're getting into right now. We're going to try to do this, you know, really probably better for the frame to come out, but we want to see if we can do it in frame. That way, if we want to swap some parts out, we have another cam we may test, depending on what this looks like, that you know, we can just kind of swap things in and out really easily. Obviously we're going to take the exhaust and stuff off, but we're going to see how much of this we can do with it still in the frame. If it looks like it's going to be kind of questionable, then we're not going to do that. And then we have some other stuff, and I'll get to that later. But after we do the engine, we have some things that we're going to test, and like I say, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we have some other things that we think are going to further enhance the performance of this motor, and hopefully net some nice gains. Actually two more things. We're going to do everything in stages so we can really see what each step does. So more on that later. Next, let's get into the motor. Alrighty, so Texas pulled the top end of this thing off. Obviously the piston's still in place, and as we would expect, it practically looks new with just some combustion remnants on the piston. But essentially now what we're going to do is pull the piston, and we're going to replace it with our forged unit here, which does have some small differences aside from the fact that it's forged lighter and it's going to increase compression. This piston uses a different design wrist pin clip versus the ones that we purchased from KTM that are around here somewhere. I don't know where. Oh, here we go. No? Well, we'll compare those in a moment, but oh, here they are. Yes. So these have it sort of the shape here to go into a notch. This piston doesn't have that design and just uses a standard circular shape. There's no sort of I don't know what you would call that, but essentially where it's intended to stop into a notched area within the piston. We're not going to do that with these. So we got these, we're not going to use them. put those back in the box. And as you can see, Tex, basically all he did is just really clean this whole area up, but it looks like we're gonna have no problem completing this job, engine and frame, and should make things a little bit easier. All right, so we did wind up pulling this out. We actually saw there was a little bit of just kind of a contaminant looking, just kind of some dirty looking stuff inside the bottom end here. So we wanted to just go ahead and inspect that and make sure everything was good and get it nice and clean. So we're good there, and now we can begin to proceed with completing the install. And frankly, it only took a few moments to actually get this out of the frame. Of course, these are very serviceable, so next step is going to be, of course, we did use a ring compressor to get the piston in there. It's already pre-installed, and so now we just prepare to actually reassemble this. And this surface has, even though it looks a little beat up, we just completely scrubbed this down with some cleaner, and so even though that looks a little rough, that, rest assured, this is a clean surface. Sorry for the pause there. I had to lend a hand just because it's a little tricky. The gasket wants to move quite easily, and we didn't use anything to try to tack it down while we were doing that. So now we've got the piston oriented, clips are on, and now we just put the cylinder back into the case. Oh, I see what's happening.
I'm like, why? It should be sliding this around. There we go. Okay. Just like that.
All right, so here you can see we have our new and still mostly bare head that's preparing to, we're gonna go ahead and swap over a lot of components from the original completely stock head. Essentially, Tex made a pretty cool little tool here so we could use our press to install the seals and bearings that need to go in here. We use this little driver that we have, and made the job pretty easy with Tex's tool. And we had a little, basically we put a brace under here just to make sure that this was nice and stable. And of course we leveled this, and this is a 0-degree angle, so it enabled us to push this in completely safely. So next you'll see we're gonna go ahead and swap everything over from the original head, and then we can start doing some assembly, and we'll see if we can show you some of the inside here. This is where some of the magic is, where we should expect to find some power. Yeah, there you can see a totally different port design on the inside. Definitely something, got some you know, I noticed this, we have a little bit of dimpling here in the epoxy. I'm not really honestly thrilled about that, but hopefully it doesn't amount to anything. However, that should be noted, I don't think that's supposed to be there. So we're gonna go ahead and proceed towards our final assembly, and then we can put this thing back in and see what kind of power we're gonna make. Alrighty, so I'm sorry we're jumping ahead quite a bit because I'm having to lend a hand, and the rest of everybody else here is busy at work, so we don't have a film crew. But I did want to just touch on a couple things that were kind of interesting that happened. One, we did notice that the casting in the head, there was like some, what would you call that? Flash? I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, flash is a good word for it.
There was basically some excess aluminum down in here that had started to peel off, and it's important that we noticed that because it could potentially come off and get smashed into something and cause a failure, or at the very least accelerated wear. And then these DLC pins up here that the rockers kind of float on, one thing, this was a brand new head that we had ported, of course. We had a hell of a time getting one of these in. It was this side on the exhaust. It just did not want to go past this first little inlet here, and we just kind of you know, kept oiling it, taking it out, cleaning everything, wiping everything down and sliding it in. And finally it pushed through, and there was just kind of like a casting, just sort of, I don't know, an excess of material that it just kind of punched out. Not ideal, but you know, we're trying to get this thing together and nothing seems to be damaged, but just something I wanted to point out. And then, so it's another day, we're back at it. I think we had an SD card go full yesterday while I was in the middle of talking about some of the engine concerns we had, the OEM issues. And I think I pretty much covered everything, but we've got the engine back in. And just because we're so short on time around here, and we have a ton of, we don't just do this, obviously we have tons of customer stuff. I'm basically going to skip some of that. We were going to do some things in stages and test. What does this do? What does this do? What does this do? And I'm sorry, we probably should still do that at some point. And maybe in the future we can put the stock intake back on, but just in the sake of saving time and being efficient, we have currently an intake that we want to test. And since we have so little time, we're going to go ahead and put it on. And I'm going to go ahead and wire up the second injector. That we're not going to initiate right away. So I will be able to test before and after second injector stuff. We're going to go ahead and install the second injector. I'm just going to leave it turned off until it comes time to build the map for that. But what we're doing now is basically just removing the stock intake and air filter. And this way we can use the one that you've seen, which is going to use this 3D printed design here. Obviously you can see the sort of the mount for the second injector is already in place. And it's going to use this type of K&N air filter. There is also another type of sort of foam dirt bike filter, air filter that is by Uni, I think, that we have on order. Probably going to be easier to use that one for most people just because it's a lot more of a flexible design, but they're back ordered and I don't know when they're going to be here, so we're going to use the K&N one for now, and I think the K&N one's going to work fine. So yep, we're going to go ahead and pop this out. We're looking into the wiring now. We're basically going to wire that second injector into the same connector that our quick shifter is wired into right here. So we'll basically just pop this boot off. I think there's a shared ground there, so we'll have to, you know, connect a wire into that existing ground pin, and then we'll run the other signal wire to the injector. All right, so here you can see we've got this intake mocked up, and what Tex is doing is basically just doing some preliminary checking because we're going to have to cut into the factory fuel line and add this sort of T-fitting into it, and then, yep, as you see there. And then we're going to run this secondary fuel line to our second injector. And so he's just kind of trying to find the cleanest and simplest way to do this. It's not going to make it difficult for us to service and work on stuff later on. All right, so here you can see Tex has gone ahead and plumbed the second injector. The injector's connected. Obviously the wiring hasn't been run yet. That's the injector there, the green guy back there. This is our T-fitting, and so that's all set, and now he's just going to basically install the existing brake line that, or excuse me, fuel line that we cut that has the quick disconnect on it. That was something Tex just pointed out, is that we are losing the ability to have a quick disconnect from the throttle body, but I don't expect that's going to be much of an issue. And if it is, we figure out some way to fit one in there with the limited amount of space we have. I'm sure it's possible, but not really something we're worried about right now. All right, so we're chipping away at this. As you can see, the pipe's back on, and I have been working on this harness here to tie into our AIM ECU, and it did not use a shared ground. There's actually pin 1 and 2 are dedicated to the injector, so we've got that all set up now. And I actually spent a lot more time on this than I really intended to, because the wiring that came on that injector, I really didn't like it. It was kind of crappy, and so I decided to go ahead and just use some R wire. We had some Tefzel, and it's a lot more durable. I think it'll last longer, and it's just easier to work with. So I made a new harness for this, and now we're just going to reconnect this to the injector up in here, and then we're going to go ahead and try to test fire this thing. It's hopefully it starts right up, so we'll see. Alrighty everyone, we've got everything in place. We're going to try and test fire this, just make sure there's no weird noises and that it starts and idles normally. It's kind of a tricky deal getting everything in place. This does take up a lot of space in there. And for now, we just kind of have the intake air temperature sensor just wedged in there because it just needs to be picking up air, or excuse me, the temperature is relatively close to the intake. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we're gonna go ahead and give her a go. We did prime this engine prior to this, so battery's a little low. then we'll put it on the dyno and do some measurements. All right, everyone, so that is first dyno testing. That is with a single injector. I do have, of course, the second injector plumbed. You can see some of that probably. Actually, you can. It's pretty busy. You can sort of see it in there. There it is, right there. That's not turned on yet because that's going to take a lot of time to set the map up for that. It's not something where you just flip a switch and it works. Unfortunately, so that's going to take some work, and we'll get to that later. So for now, we just wanted to test a single injector, new intake, new engine spec, more compression on the piston, boarded head, and a more aggressive cam profile. So we've done that. It is, I want to say it is really hot in here. I want to point this out because you guys should probably let's see if I can even get this to turn on. I don't know if I can get it to turn on, but yeah, the battery's dead, my Solo. But the intake air temperature is over 100 degrees in here. That is not optimal, to say the least. Engine doesn't like that. It would much prefer it to be 70 degrees in here. So it's really hot and humid in here today, but enough jibber jabber. Let's see how much power did it make. Do you have any guesses? It did make, we did improve. So I'm gonna overlay our best run with the DVR from the last test on the dyno, which was, I was really happy with. Almost made 60 horsepower. I think we got 59.4 is the highest one I have pulled up here. I think that was the best one. I went through several. And then now our best, we have a best of 66.2. My phone is ringing off the hook as soon as I start trying to make a video for you guys. Anyway, so yeah, best of 66.2. And I do think we're going to be able to improve on that. I feel pretty confident we're going to at least be able to get over 67, and I hope with the second injector maybe 68 plus. I would love to see 70, but I think that's getting a little greedy. So yeah, we'll just show that that's where we are now, and it's, you know, at our peak value here we're making a good, you know, 8 horsepower more there. And I mean, as you can see, in everywhere you want it, from 6,500 plus, it's much faster. So this is really going to be what we want in a Supermoto machine. It pulls the way it should up top. Have really not lost much of anything from the previous config. And what we'll do now is overlay the stock bike, best run with the stock bike. I'm going to close this DVR map and pull up the stock one, and we're going to compare stock best run to now best run. Another thing I want to point out is I do have a different tire on here. It's not helping our results. We may put the other Bridgestone back on for testing purposes, but I have a K1 on here at a pretty low pressure, not helping our values. It's a little too sticky. When we were doing the pulls, this thing was like glued to the drum. That's really not a good thing for results on the dyno. So we might actually, since we have our beautiful new wheels, and we might just make this on test days, we might just throw that old Bridgestone back on there to have a more direct comparison. But anyway, let's see what the stock dyno numbers were. Okay, here is our stock versus current, and this is our best stock run versus now 12 horsepower peak. I think that is really good. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. This is going to be a big difference. I'm tempted to take this thing down the road. We won't do that, of course, because that's illegal. We don't have a tag, but I'm very tempted to just take it for a spin and see what it feels like. Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty nice machine to ride. So yeah, that's what we've got. I think we're going to be pretty happy with that on the racetrack. And it's going to be really cool to see what happens when we enable that second injector and test that, because I know in our Superbike and Super Sport world, that makes a really big difference. I mean, it's a very tangible difference. We see on a superbike, you know, it could be several horsepower on the dyno. So, and just changing small percentages of secondary contribution, much less completely adding in that whole strategy. So this is going to be, it'll be a cool test. Hopefully we can find some power in it, and it's not just a bunch of time wasted. Either way, you guys get to come along and see how it works out, and if it's worth the effort, you know, we'll get into that. And we're going to spend a bunch of time, because once we invest in something like this, I'm going to try my best to get the most out of the package. If I have to consult with people, then I will. But hopefully we can just get that working pretty well. So we'll give you one last look. I think that's it for now. The next test will for sure try to do something about the tire, and we'll do some, and we'll do a before and after with the tire change, with the secondary injector disabled and then enabled. That way we have a true apples to apples comparison. See if it's actually, you know, if there's anything in that. But I hope you guys are as satisfied as we are with this. I know, and I'm sorry I couldn't show you everything on the process. It's just, like I mentioned, we're so busy, and I have to jump in and give Tex a hand with some of this, and we can't show everything anyway, but we try to show as much as possible. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for this one. I really appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to like this video, comment below, and subscribe, and let us know if there's anything else you want us to touch on. We've got more stuff coming for this bike. We're not done by a long shot. Not obviously engine-wise, we've made a big step, but we have a lot of other stuff that's going to be coming. Some really cool upgrades, stuff to make it work better around a racetrack, and then it's just going to be riding the thing. So once again, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Guys, I know I said I was done with this, but I actually did think of an interesting comparison. I wanted to show you guys something that I think was quite interesting, which is that we used to have an SXV 550 here that was quite well done. We don't really do a lot of the engine stuff on those, and this one the engine had been gone through by Nolan at Transworld Cycle, which is a renowned SXV builder guy, and he's just a good person to go through the engines on those and make sure everything's reliable and toleranced as it should have been from the factory. So he's a good resource, and like I say, frankly, we don't go through those things very much. So anyway, this was a long time ago, but we did have one, and this was exactly 5 years ago that this thing was on the dyno. 725, today's 723, and so this thing was full fresh SXV 550, gone through by Alan Nolan, had a VDB aero full system on it, tie, and had a custom calibration that was based off the VDB map that we did on the dyno. I made some fueling adjustments and stuff to get it to kind of flatten out, improve everything, pick up a little power. But so the SXV made a peak power of 67.15 and a peak torque of 37.9. So our KTM is actually making a tiny amount more torque and less than a horsepower less peak. I think that is really incredible. Now, granted, at lower RPMs, you know, down here we can see the SXV was producing a bit more power and torque. However, I mean, you know, we're not aiming, considering the fact that these things both rev to a little over 11 grand, that's almost irrelevant. We hardly ever spend any time down there. So this is just something to keep in mind. We have a fully tuned, full exhaust, known as sort of the fastest, most monstrous supermoto that doesn't weigh a ton, the SXV 550 V-twin 550cc engine versus this 450 single. I'm pretty impressed by the fact that we're making approximately the same amount of power and torque. So just a cool comparison, and it's a good start to see where we're going to go next. Hey guys, so I know I provided some, basically I wrapped up that video on Friday, and today's Monday, and told you I was done and we'll see you next time and all that stuff, but I really wanted to spend a bunch of time trying to get that second injector working, just because I felt like we're going to be moving on to some other stuff in the next video, and I wanted to just go ahead and wrap this up. And we're going to split this one up into 2 parts anyway, because there's just so much information and you know, it's going to be a long video. Anyway, so what I did is I did spend some time working with the second injector, and you know what, in fact, I'm going to grab my laptop, I think it's up here, and I'm going to show you a little bit of sort of like how this works, because there is, okay, sorry about that, the battery died in this thing like it always does. Anyway, what I was going to say is there's a lot of setup that gets involved, and I'm just going to show you some of the stuff that you have to do when you're setting this up. So essentially you're going to go into, and this is of course the Cobra software, Spark. So you have to actually first select the dual injector, and then once you do this, then you can go over here and go to the Injector 2 column, and then here's where you can set all of your things. Battery corrections, percentages, which is the contribution, and you can see that it kind of pre-populates some tables, and then phase, which is basically injection angle. Yeah, so you got a lot of stuff to populate here, and the reason I'm showing you this is because this means that it takes a long time to get this working, and even in a decent window, because you have to test a lot of stuff to try to find what's optimal. So since the last pulls that we did, I think the highest was 66.2 horsepower. I've done 70 more full throttle pulls and a lot of part throttle stuff, testing things and just trying to find basically our phase value and our contribution, what's the best balance overall for not just power but drivability. And I'm sure there's still some minor improvements, but I've done a ton of testing and I'm pretty confident that I've found an overall really good setting. So I'm just going to show you now our best before, I think, and our best so far now. Okay, so here we can see our best previous run and our new run with the second injector. And as you can see, our peak power only went up by about 3/4 of a horsepower, which is nothing crazy, but it's because at the peak, the delta is quite small there. However, we have plenty of other areas, such as here, where we're making 2.5 plus more horsepower. So overall, I do think this is worth it. And our torque went up 0.6 peak. And again, we're just seeing big gains in torque pretty much throughout. So I think that this is worthwhile. Obviously, there's a lot of time and cost associated with something like this, so it's all relative to the person. For us, this is worth it because this in no way sacrifices reliability. Their only cost is the actual cost and the time. And then just for comparison purpose, we'll overlay this versus our best stock file. This was when the bike was completely stock, so this is, you know, straight off the showroom floor, fully broken in, and you can just see we're making huge power in some of these areas, 12 plus more horsepower up here. This thing, I mean, it's just a different motorcycle now. And once more, since we referenced the Aprilia a few times, and that's kind of the king of Supermoto horsepower. There's one here. There we go. So, still makes a little more power, but overall, I mean, it's quite close. And there are areas where the KTM is actually stronger. Basically, all the way up until about 9,900 RPM, the KTM actually is a bit faster. So pretty impressive. I think overall we've done a pretty good job. And keep in mind, this thing is running pump gas, just regular old 93, nothing special. And I think it's come out quite good, and I think it's going to drive really well. So that's going to do it for the engine development video. I think we have some stuff in the off season. We may do this, squeeze another couple of horsepower out of this thing, but for now, this is going to be good until the winter months. And I went ahead and fitted the Alpina rear wheel, so I'm going to show that to you now just so you can kind of see what the bike looks like in its current state. I'm really happy with it. Everything's put together. The wheels just look fantastic on this thing. I do have the Zeta easy or quick change style spacers that are kind of tapered, and that makes swapping out the rear wheel a little bit easier. And yeah, looks a lot better, I think. I actually had a crash on this thing the last time I rode it, so we got all that all tightened up and looks good. So perfect. I think that's going to do it for this one. We do have some really cool stuff coming in the near future, so we'll be expecting another video quite soon. But until then, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and comment below. Thank you for watching.